أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذ ابتلى إبراهيم ربه بكلمات فأتمهن قال إني جاعلك للناس إماما قال ومن ذريتي قال لا ينال عهد الظالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. And when Ibrahim was tried by his Lord with certain words, and he completed them, and he asked, and he said to him, surely I am making you to the people an imam. And he said, and from my children, he said, surely my promise does not include the unjust. Alhamdulillah, we're gathered here on the joyous day of birthday of Imam Al-Hadi. And in our present time, unfortunately, this is also a sad day for us because of the martyrdom and the murder of several Muslims in New Zealand. So we would like to read a Surah Fatiha for them, and also there's a request for a Surah Fatiha for several of the people who sponsored this program. This is for Zarham Haydar Naqvi, Sayyida Naghat Naqvi, Marhum Muhammad al-Mahdi. Please give a loud salawat for all of them. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So we have begun with this verse because this verse has a lot of meaning in it, and it is one which is talking about Prophet Ibrahim, that Allah tried him and had him do many things before giving him the position of Imam. So among those things was that when he was a young man, when he was actually a child, of course, he was monotheist, because in our belief system, the prophets were always monotheists. So it's not that he was an idol worshiper and then came to understand monotheism. No, Allah created him with a sound aql and righteousness from a child, as we believe about the prophets. And he rejected his people from that time and refused to worship idols with them, even though it was an idol worshipping group of people. And he challenged them and pushed back against them, and finally ended up being thrown into the fire and being driven out from his home because of it. So he did the belief in Iman on his own. He did tabligh of the religion and encouraging people to join it. He did Amr bil Ma'ruf publicly, and even to the point of putting his life on the line for the cause of Allah. Then he did hijrah. He was driven to another place. They said that also he was the first who did jihad, fi sabilillah, fighting against the oppressors at that time. He went and he talked to the pharaohs in Egypt. So he did a lot of different things. Then after all of that, Allah still continued to try him, which was, he made him to sacrifice his son, which was Ismail in our belief. And after all of these things, and he showed that he was completely submissive to the will of Allah, Allah said, now even though you already have reached the position of prophet, I am now raising you up to the position of Imam. And then he said, I'm making you Imam for the people. So there's two things about this. Obviously, the first one is that the Imam is a position above prophethood. So this position of prophethood, and then it's something special. Not every prophet is to this level. Meaning after all of these types of things, then Prophet Ibrahim was raised up to now this high position. And then Allah granted him something with that. So of course that means Isma and Ilm and Wahi and all of these things. And then on top of that is Imam. So if any person says that, well, the Imam doesn't have Wahi, meaning yes, it's true in the sense that there's not going to be a book after the Prophet, but he has divine inspiration, meaning Allah will guide him. Because all Wahi is in there, like Wahi is this, that's the definitions that we have. Meaning that Wahi is meaning kitab, but that's not all of Wahi. Allah gave inspiration to the bee. So Allah, it's not that Allah only gives, the only type of Wahi is kitabun munzil, that a book sent down from Allah. No, there's other types of Wahi. So there's divine inspiration. But of course there's darajat, meaning that there's some that Allah inspires the bee to dig a hole, inspires the Musa to throw the baby carrot in the water. And then there's specific commands, meaning if you disobey this, you are disobeying Allah. But the only people who receive that type of clear Wahi, they have to be on a high level. Meaning they won't also disobey. Meaning Allah can give them inspiration, which is direct, or send down to them. We have that, the angels continue to come down. Even after the end of the Prophet. They didn't come down much for Prophet Muhammad, and then they never come down. So this is, and Ibrahim says, وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي. He asked a question. He said that now that I did this, I can ask something from Allah. Allah put me on this position, then I can ask. He said that وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي. This is the request of Ibrahim from Allah. That after I pass away, will this imamat stay in my family? And Allah would have said no. It's going to be open for the people. Anytime a person raises up to this level, then I'm going to make that person the imam. It's not going to be in a specific lineage. Allah would say that. He's the creator. He can say no. This imamat is an open door. He said no. He said correct. I'll give you your request. You made all of these sacrifices and things for me. Alhamdulillah, you've risen to this level. You were my Abdul Salih for all of these years. You put yourself through these hardships. So I'm going to grant your request. So the answer is وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي, and from my descendants. So the answer, we say that there's a word which is mahdhuf, which is that it's taken out there. We don't see that. We just say لَا يُنَالَ الْأَحْدِ بِسِمَ. But the word we don't say, which is the no in Arabic, for those of you who don't speak Arabic. He said, لا ينهدي الأحد الظالمين. That my promise is not going to include the oppressors. But the word that we don't see in the Quran, but we understand, is na'am. Yes. And from my descendants will be imams? Yes. Because he said it's not including these people. So you understand that, yes, it is including this other group of people. And then when Allah is talking now, He's talking to a prophet. So He's not talking on our understanding of Zalim and Madlum. This is to the level of prophets, not to the level of us. Because we say, mashallah, Shaykh Farouk, is he a Zalim? No, mashallah, he's a good guy. But on Allah's level, no, this, you don't even talk about Shaykh Farouk or any other. So our level is one thing, but Allah's no. He's saying, Allah's talking in bishakal mutlaq, that He's talking entirely. La yunal al-ahdi, meaning no, it's not going to be anybody of your descendants except for these ones who are not zalimin, to my understanding, to this high understanding. Because we have, when we're talking about prophets, we went into this a little bit last time, we were talking about, we said that this tarka awla we talked about, meaning the prophet does something that is unbecoming to him as a prophet. So for us, it would be the most righteous action that we have ever even imagined. But for a prophet, on his scale, it's not. It's not to the level. So if we want to, just to recap, for maybe some people missed it or they didn't grasp it. I like to use sports metaphor because it's short, it's fast. So you basically live a whole life, but in a few minutes or whatever, on like a football pitch. If we take a child and you put him on the World Cup and he tries to take a penalty kick and he kicks it and it doesn't quite make it, you say, mashallah, he tried. Or maybe he kicks it and he makes it. Like, this is the greatest thing. This child, boom, he kicked it and he kicked it past the greatest goalie who ever lived, and he made the shot. But let's say that it's a great player, and we say, he kicked it past the goalie and he made the shot. But he kicked it a little too far to the right that it almost didn't make it in. Meaning we hold him to a right, even he made the right, he did the right action. So if he did research, the people who do research say that 60% of the time the goalie jumps this way and 40% he jumps this way. So on this high level, he should have kicked it the right way. He kicked it the wrong way. So either way the shot made it in, but this is tarka awla, meaning Allah is looking for the best of the best of the best. Not just that you stumbled into the right thing. A lot of judges are salat, mashallah, the person went there and he made salat. No, but the Prophet, did he do it with, was his concentration there? Was it, how did he do his wudu? Did he say the right dua? He's going to be judged on a higher level. And also this happens to us. As we go up, as inshallah we are going up, as we're getting better, inshallah, with our prayers and our fasting, then Allah also starts sometimes we get punishments from Allah. We do something, and maybe last year it was okay for us. Our aql was to that, our reason was to that level, our iman was to that level. It's maybe increased. You do the same thing this time, sometimes Allah will punish you in this world because He wasn't happy with what you did. So, meaning this can happen, this tarka awla can even happen to, the Abdul Salih from amongst us. Not to the level of the prophets or the imams, but to this. But to get back to our point, which is that Allah is saying that two things that He's saying. Now, meaning yes, that we don't see here, but this act is going to continue till Yawm al-Qiyamah, you can understand. But it's not going to be for the Zalimeen to this level. So meaning that there is going to be this position, this mansab, this place of Imam from now to Yawm al-Din. And this also is Ja'al, meaning Allah is going to choose from amongst you an Imam. And also, this imamat is not going to be babun maftu. It's not going to be open door. It's going to be in a particular zurriyah. And of course, this zurriyah is Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. And how do we know? Because if it's not concerning Islam, then why would Allah put all this emphasis and put it in the Quran? Concerning the Jews or something. No, it's Muhammad and Ali Muhammad because of that. Even when they give the salawat, which is the Kamil one, is that, give barakah on Muhammad and Ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala Ibrahim. So what's this barakah on Ibrahim wa ala Ibrahim? Is this imamat, of course. Nabuwat and imamat, and with the Nabuwat is closed in the position of imamat is still there. So this now continues on. From that time until afterwards. So now what does this, of course, have to do with our Imam Hadi alayhi salam? Imam Hadi was one of these Imams who received the position of Imamat while he was very young. That his father passed away, so he became the Imam openly, meaning he had all the sifat of the Imam, but there's never two Imams at the same time, meaning that both of them are leaders. But one is the Ma'mum in that time, so Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein are there, meaning Imam has all of the personality of the Imam, but at the time he's the follower of his brother. Or at the time when Imam Hassan and Hussein are there and their father Amir al-Mu'mineen is there, they are following, they are Ma'mum for their father. So now, after the passing of his father, then he became the Imam at a very young age. And this was not a problem. The first time when this happened, that the Imam was young, this was kind of a shock for the community, that they were surprised that an Imam could be that young. And then they were tested, and they showed that no, that Allah gave them, the kitab and the wisdom even as a young man. So this wasn't a surprise the next time when they realized that the person possessing the knowledge and possessing the wisdom was a young man. And there's some riwayat that some people tried to follow his older brother, actually. But I've only read that in a couple of places. Now, to move on to now the political situation of the Imam, which is always what we like to do a little bit of, because this is very much showing us an example for what to do in times which are similar to those times. When you have a time which is similar to the time of the Imam always had, we sometimes, because the Imam did the right thing, we think that it's automatic. We kind of don't really think, well, he could have done the other thing too. So when we have that Imam Hussein did jihad, we never think, well, maybe, why didn't he do sword? So he did war, but we don't really think, why didn't he do this? Obviously. But at the time, people say, well, why didn't he just go over, do taqiyya, accept Yazid, and do something else with his life, and then reject it later? No, he came out and at that time he said, no, I can't even accept Yazid, even from the bab of taqiyya, because of the danger that it puts for Islam. So now we realize that there's a had for taqiyya. So this is a sunnah now, that if I'm going to do this dissimulation and hiding my faith, it's for personal safety. But it stops at the point when your personal safety and your religion. So you can do taqiyya to a point. But if now the religion becomes in danger for your personal safety, then you're unable to do taqiyya at this point. When the person, maybe let's say you have a crowd that won't understand that it's taqiyya. And now Islam will now be left. You have to not do it. The Imam is in danger. I can't go, the Imam is about to be killed, and I say, well, mashallah, I'm doing taqiyya. No, that's not the time for taqiyya. So it shows us that there's a limit to it. So now at this time, the Imam did not lead a jihad against the Bani Abbas at this time. So now let's look, and he was quiet, he stayed in his house, and he continued to build on the Shia infrastructure. That was his main action and preparing for Imam Mahdi. So his main action was building Shia infrastructure, getting people used to not having an Imam, referring to ulama, things like this, but he couldn't have done the jihad, because other people were doing it. The jihads that they had were successful to some degree, meaning they were shaking up the Bani Abbas, that every few years, they call them Aliyids in history, meaning the children of Hassan or sometimes of the other sons, or sometimes they would be like the children of Ja'far, or different people would come over and say, I'm from the Ahl Bayt, I'm trying to do Islam, and they go out and they do a jihad. Or they would be Khawarij, and they would say, these guys, these Abbasids, they're, Kafirs and whatnot, and they go out and they do jihad. They would call it jihad. And they would do destruction and rampage and kill and loot and pillage, and nothing would happen at the end. The Tawhut would still be there, and there wouldn't be a change in society. So he didn't do jihad, even though at this time now the Shia groundwork had become much more powerful and much more strong. Homs was pouring in. They had set up an alternate government and all that type of thing. But he did not order his people to go out and fight at this time. And another point is, at the time of these later Imams, the Bani Abbas had started to become weak. They were not strong like how they had been at the beginning. They became worried because of the people that they had were becoming restless. So the majority of people, meaning the majority of the Muslim community at this point, was Arabs or Persians. There was still some Egyptians, but they were not as close to the seats of government. They could be crushed down without having to devote that much resources. But the ones that were dangerous to them were Arabs and Persians at this time. And a lot of revolutions would come out of Yemen, they would come out of Iraq, they would come out of Medina, and sometimes they would come out of Persia. So they didn't trust these people, and so they brought in guards who were Turkish to suppress the people. This is what the askari is. That's where the Turkish guards lived. And so they would put the Imam there so he's disconnected from his followers. And so they're like, now we don't have to worry that he's going to do a khuruj and come out with a sword against us. We have him here in this location. So they had these Turkish guards with the intention of defeating the Shias, defeating the Khawarij, and things like that. But what happened is their guards became more powerful than them. So let's say the Khalifa would die, and he says, I want this one of my sons to become the Khalifa after me. The guards would say, yeah, I don't think so. And they would be like this one. And they would flip this one for that one and that one for this. So they become extremely weak. But they have these rough tongues. This is where this word sultan comes from. Because sultan in Arabic doesn't mean king. Now we use it, we understand it as meaning king. But that's not what the word means. It means something powerful, something strong. It means like hujjah. Correct? If in the word in its meaning by itself, when you read it in the Quran, it's not the meaning of thing. Like when they say that you can go to the sky, the heaven and the earth, but you can't go illa the sultan, it doesn't say, unless you have a king, then you can't go to the heavens. No, unless you have something powerful, unless you have something strong. So this is what it means. So they would have Turkish sultans, and these people would control the rest of the people. If you say anything to the king, he sends his sultan, would be the leader of the army, and he would go and attack you and kill you and stuff like that. Now these people now, they became more powerful than the Khalifa himself. If he said anything to them, they would kick him out and throw him out. So some people would think on a worldly level, this is the perfect time for jihad. There's fitna amongst the Muslims. Nobody knows right from wrong. Now we can come over and we can seize power and place ourselves in charge. But the Imam didn't do that. At this time when there was a lot of fitna, the Muslim kingdom was breaking up. Once this had happened, because now at this time, remember, the Bani Umayyah had already established itself in Spain. The Arab expansion had already stopped. That energy had not gone away. The Turks were now beginning to invade. People didn't know it, but these Turks taking over the kingdom was the sort of the harbinger of Genghis Khan and them coming, which came a few generations later. So at this time, at a time of confusion, at a time without knowledge, the Imam did not go and launch a civil war. So we see that there was a few times when the Imam did not. One was at the time of Imam Sadiq, where the people wanted to do a revolution, and they said the Imam thought about it, he considered it, but then he realized that these people were not following him. They said that we want to do a revolution. He said, if I'm the Imam, then I tell you when to do a revolution. Not that you say we're going to do the revolution with or without you. And then you want me to be a figurehead. You want me to, and then you're going to turn on me afterwards. And some of his brothers and things like that say, no, we're going to join in. And they went and killed the Bani Umayyah, then they turned around and killed the Bani Hashim who they had with them. And then they put the Bani Abbas and made them be in charge. So the people, when they were jahil and ignorant, the Imam did not order them for war. So now this comes to us, that when we are trying to do Islamic work, that the first step, which is very important, is to build the infrastructure of tashayyu. Make sure that the people are recognizing the people who the Imam has left with them. Make sure the people are recognizing who their Imam is. Make sure the people are very aware and understanding. And also, not just on a simple level. Sometimes we think, because we have a lot of Shias now. The Shias are large now. And it doesn't look like, it looks like the time of the Imam is near, but it doesn't look like the numbers of the Shia versus Sunni or Shias versus population of the world is going to flip anytime soon. So we see this happening now, meaning it's kind of steady. How many Shias we have now? The nisbat of their population versus the rest of the world, and versus the population of the Ahl-Sunnah. What's being missing? And also the Shias recognize the Imam, meaning the Shias, if Imam comes and it's thought that there's Imam, they accept it. But their awareness in general and the infrastructure is still weak. Meaning there's, the beginnings of it is there, but the infrastructure of the Shaykh is not there. So this is something that we have to work on amongst ourselves so that we can be as something which is useful for the Imam in our time. So that when the Imam gives an order, it's not like, oh, we have to go over and collect this, we have to go over and get that. That wouldn't, doing a zuhur at a time like that, with people like that, even if they recognize you and they obey you, but they're completely disorganized themselves. You don't have any sort of secondary and third command structure. This is, alhamdulillah, starting to get built with the respect that has been built up by the ulama, with respect that has been built up, but the infrastructure and these type of things, inshallah, still has to get built. So inshallah, this is something that we'll be all able to work on in our lives, something that we'll all be able to inculcate into our lives, and work on with our starting with ourselves and our families. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa